Hello. Good day.
Hello.
Good day. Good day.
Thank you. Hi, EJ. Great
Hi.
to connect with you again today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm
So, in continuation of our Princess Naku series and
hmm
the cultural series that we're developing,
Right.
today we'll be looking at storytelling slash literature and specifically Princess Naku series as a healing
hmm
tool, right?
Okay.
Like something that can,
Awesome.
something that people could be utilizing in that way to help
hmm
them resolve
Past
trauma,
traumas. hmm
things that have they have dealt with in the past. So
Sounds good.
um so I would want to start off by having you tell us a little bit. I know last time we talked about the journey getting to
Hmm
the book itself, but I
Correct.
wanted to focus some time to like more time today on the actual writing, right? To
Okay.
actually get the characters together,
Sure.
put the narrative down, what
Sure.
it did for you. So sort of that
hmm
personal reflection on what that did for you
What that
and
did for me.
have
Okay.
what it's hopefully also doing for other people.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So with regards to the character, and I think we touched on a little bit about where how she came about, right? And why I chose her age and who she is and what she represents, right? Okay, and then the part where I picked her grandfather was pretty easy.
Which I think is it doesn't hurt to go over that again for somebody who would
Okay,
just watch this.
who's just watching this for the first time. Okay, good. Okay, so with Princess Naku, I chose a 15-year-old girl because, again, like we said, the psychology of young children in schools is that they want like a big brother, big sister. Usually they gravitate towards books that are focused, that have strong leads, older leads. And so it was easy to, allow her be 15 for that reason. And also the fact that she was going to be independent and she was going to travel and she was going to explore all these regions, pretty much by herself. So it was important that she was of an age where she could like express and be understood and also understand concepts. And so that was easy to do. Now the part about her grandfather was also easy to do because like I shared in the last one, my grandfather was a war veteran, one of those African war veterans that have gone unrecognized till date. And he traveled to a lot of countries in Africa, ended up settling in Cameroon, and so it was easy to for him to be her guide, so to speak, because he's well versed in Africa and the regions and all the countries, and so that was easy. And again, the importance of establishing how do I put this, establishing an older person who's more informed, that sort of like just puts it all brings it all together. And so that was that. And so and but the one thing that was difficult, should I say, was finding the best way to break down the key concepts about like African history, or and all of that. That kind of, I struggled a little bit with that. But then again, being that the K to 12, I mean, I've seen a couple of their geography books, I've seen a couple of their history books. I sort of found a way to just touch on. I didn't go in depth. I touched on, like the origin of some, like the Bantu tribe and how the Bantus traveled. So a couple of the books would refer to the Bantu. Bantu was one tribe that pretty much traveled across Africa, right? They resettled across Africa from the north to the south. And I want to even believe that our lineage as Igbo people or as Yoruba, or even let's go to the westernmost part of Africa, which is Senegal, right? I want to believe that there's the influence of the Bantu tribe all across, because these are nomads. These were nomads that traveled, and then even towards Ethiopia, right? So there was a lot of migration. I mean, we know that for a fact. There's a lot of migrating here and there, and so the predominant tribes were like the Bantus and all of that. So anyway, that kind of so I made so that was kind of the tricky part, which was, how do I focus on this tribe, that has so much to share and so much to, and most of the travels involved war. Yes,
Mm,
remember, because they're warriors, they're nomads, and they encountered all sorts of opposition and all kinds of things. And so I had to find a way to be soft about it, to be, without being heavy with too much information that could take away from the fun part of the Princess Naku exploration, so to speak.
And I think that speaks to the craft that you want to be able to do that, because as we think about this topic, the idea of using storytelling as a healing tool, right? That it is important that there be a connection between the person who's reading the story and the character of the story.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yes.
So you have to strike this balance where is it, like you said, is a character that is believable. Okay, so if this person is 50-year-old, then it's possible that they have explored, like, their grandpa as the guide. And then you also want to make sure that the story is true, like it's or close enough to facts of things, so that we're not. Yes. So
yes, indeed.
The work you did is really delicate, that it took a lot of craft to get that
it is
of
yes
character, but also using like facts to make sure that because you shared with me, and I hope our audience takes note of this. You did get back from someone. Get that story yourself. Like,
yes. So the lady from I have to remember what country that was, but she reached out to me. I have to remember. I don't want to mess this up. Give me 1 second.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I received a message on my Facebook page, one of my Facebook pages, and she says, "Hello, I saw your book on Amazon. In May of this year, I learned that my maternal ancestry is from Bioko Island, the Bubi people. I would like to order several of your books." And so I kind of gave her information, and she was like, "Thank you. I love the positive vision of your books." And that made a world of difference. Equatorial Guinea is the country she's referring to. And again, like we said, the ability for Princess Naku, should I say the importance of Princess Naku for me was her ability to reach different people. Does that make sense? It doesn't even matter whether it's different demographics. They didn't only have to be Blacks or Africans. It could be anybody. And so, but what I realized is, especially with this particular person who reached out to me, is the fact that African Americans who will be exposed to the books, right, have a different way they're going to come at it, if that makes sense. And like we said, the ancestry factor kicks in, especially for people who have had to use DNA ancestry to understand the roots to Africa, their links to Africa. So for, using her story and her reaching out and saying that she did ancestry and went looking, researching for like material on that particular tribe, and Princess Naku popped up. I thought that was just wonderful. And so back to your question, your statement about the importance of Naku. It's almost like she came, or the books have come as a, should I say, harbinger of healing, right? They've come as an open, how do we say, when you want to have an icebreaker, when you have meetings and you have icebreakers, right? The books have come as an icebreaker to the door of healing, or the necessity, should I say, of approaching this thing called healing, this division that took place, right, 400 years ago. And yes, we've found ways to, different areas to talk about it. And we talked about reparation, as if reparations are going to erase the hurt and the pain and the loss of identity. You see what I'm saying? So these books have come as a way to open the door, if it's just a mere crack, a tiny crack, for us to have the conversation about the necessity for healing. Because
Absolutely.
we take it for granted because we're from, we can pretty much pinpoint
Well,
where you know, our own location in Africa, even though, again, back to what I said about the Bantu and the nomads, you know, not one place, everybody migrated to wherever they ended up being, or wherever their tribe ended up being. So I mean, even if you will talk about it based on my people, the Uguta people, there's a story that we migrated from Bini, and it's reflected in our language, in our food, in our fashion. You know what I mean? So there's no argument there, even though some people choose to argue, but that's another story. But what I'm saying is, so this became important, you know, even though while I was working on it, it wasn't a conscious effort. It wasn't something I set out to do, like, okay, let me use this as a healing tool. It was just something that just made practical sense. We've always talked about Africa. We've always talked about the slave ship, but we've never talked to the slave ships that left, but we've never talked about what happened prior to the slave ships.
all that.
You know, and we didn't even go in deep to talk about what the cultures were, how they were, and how they were, you know, in what state they were in after the slave ships left. That's another conversation. The pain of losing family. You know what I mean? And we're talking how many millions of people were shipped over. So it's another conversation. So the healing is not on one side, it's on both sides.
It's on both sides, absolutely.
It's on both sides. So you know, gradually we'll get there. Good thing I'm dealing with your psychiatrist and psychologist, so you know how to approach this whole thing. But back to what I was saying. So yeah, it was important that Naku, as from the feedback I got, it appeared that Naku was playing a strong role in creating, should I say, pride of ancestry.
Yes.
In allowing it to take place.
And
her own little way.
About even the ancestry test that people are doing now. So someone tells you, oh, you're from XYZ tribe, or among this, or this suggests likely that you're from this, right? It doesn't always tell you the story, because that's what I like this Naku series. It tells you the story, the rich culture, right? The rich culture, that, you know, a way of life of people that was wholesome. Right?
Correct.
Because the stories that have been passed down to us, you and I inclusive, right? Even we're raised, you know, with our families, and but because of the stories of colonialism and apartheid, the other horrible things that have happened to Africa beyond slavery, right?
Correct.
The stories that have been told is that we are less than.
We are less than, correct.
Right?
Which indeed is the opposite of the truth.
Absolutely.
The exact opposite, the direct opposite of the reality, yeah.
Which is what is most powerful and, in my opinion, empowering about
Naku.
Naku shares, it helps us explore an Africa we don't know.
That's
and
true.
We get to see Africa from new eyes. Like, she gets
Correct.
to us, this is Africa. It is beautiful.
Correct.
We have people who have feelings and emotions.
Correct.
And thoughts, and and have weaknesses and strengths. We're humans, period.
We're humans, correct.
Those are the humanity of Africa. So I think it's really important. I like that this lady, she gave her feedback, right?
She did.
And you think about so many other people who are reading and not necessarily reaching back to give you feedback, but this tells us people's lives are being lifted, right?
Correct. No matter how tiny, or how briefly. Yes. No, I agree with you. And even to tie into what you said about like the ancestry aspect of it. So the reason Princess Naku, the part about you said about feeling less than, is very important, because when I came to America, I mean, you were born here and then you lived in Nigeria and you came. I wasn't born here. I was born in Nigeria. And I came here at an advanced age. 28 was quite an advanced age. And so my way of seeing and understanding was quite, should I say, was quite established.
Yes.
And so I could see cracks, I could see things, right? I wanted to tie to what you said about feeling less than. That was a vibe I got, like, once I came in here, like that, people were being made to feel like they weren't as good as, right? And that broke me. That was the beginning of me getting should I say activated, really, when it came to, speaking up about stuff like this. But that was so back to what I was saying. Yeah, I know. So but back to what I was saying about the feeling less than part. So when we tie it to Princess Naku, why is she a princess? Okay, that's going to make me tell my story about my heritage, right? My great grandfather, who was a chief, and this and that. So indeed, my grandfather and my father are princes, right? Which makes me what? A princess, correct? Okay. But we don't go about wearing the title, oh, you're princess. It doesn't matter in today's world, really, if you ask me, to be honest. But what I'm trying to say is it was important to reflect royalty.
Yes.
Because when I did my research on Africa, a lot of the regions had their kings and their queens. We cannot ignore leadership. We cannot ignore heritage. We cannot ignore, should I even say, royalty?
Yes.
Which indeed is what it is. And so that's what breaks me when I encounter the African American story and history, is that a lot of these people came from noble homes, right? A lot of them, I mean, I don't know what the circumstances were with the capturing of the people and taking them away, but a lot of these people, if they were to trace their lineage and their ancestry, will find that they came from noble homes. The story about how eventually those monarchs or monarchies were toppled over and all that. That's another thing, because when you go to seize a land, right, or to encroach on the land, you take off the head of the leaders, and that ended up happening either through famine, either through stifling of the food source, or through really like physically taking away the leader. So all those dark things happened, which I did my best not to reflect in the books, because that's not how we want to introduce the children to the story of Africa. We've done enough of talking about the negatives. It's time to focus on the positives, right? Let's at least get a lay of the land, understand what is Africa, how many countries, and this and that. So that became my focus. But again, to tie it to what you said about feeling less than, yes, it was really essential that I pointed out heritage, royalty, and the fact that they had a system of not only government, but of should I say leadership.
Yes,
I could use that, leadership, should I say? They had their set customs.
Customs, traditions, norms.
Correct. Norms, traditions, correct.
Running well-established society, basically.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So it was important to touch on it.
I think it's interesting that you talk about what happens when people want to take over society, community, right? You want to stabilize them. And that's part of what...
That's key. That's what they do.
A lot of destabilization of throwing away the monarchies, reducing them. We know what happened with Jaja for Popo, right? So there's all, and all these facts about what had happened. And that was the way colonialism came in and sort of took over. So when I even think about less than, I think of less than not just with our African American brothers and sisters here, taken out in those ships through slavery. I also think of us within Africa and colonialism, right?
Yes.
So interestingly, Africa Day, which is tomorrow, the theme of Africa Day for tomorrow is trade integration, right?
Awesome.
So it makes you think about the fact that I think Africa, or the African leaders or African people, are beginning to think about them, right? And think about how this destabilization of African communities and African countries was for economic purposes, right?
Mostly.
Yes, it was not done to favor the African people. It was done
no.
Destabilize
for the resources.
Exactly. So that the imperialists and the colonialists can come back in and take over their resources. So it's interesting to me that the Africa Day theme for tomorrow is actually about trade integration, which is
awesome.
Making me think that people are beginning to think stronger when we're together, when we don't let those those destabilizing factors continue to play a role in how we.
Correct.
So that's really
That's key. That's good. Yes. And even to add to that, I'm happy that we've started to take Africa Day even more seriously, especially in the West. In the past, it used to be like the OAU, just always, but now everybody's trying to at least get involved, trying to have those conversations that are necessary. So yeah.
And so we're just sort of also moving forward in terms of, I know that like the Africa Day is thinking about trade integration, but when we think about integration, just on a broader phenomenon beyond trade, you have to kind of think about engagement amongst people. You have to think about diversity, right? We already acknowledge that first. I mean, 900 tribes, right? So think about there's so many different people, but our strength, our diversity, that we bring to the table, but it's also the sense of belonging. We belong to, the belong together.
Yes.
We are one. And so we're going back to Princess Naku books and the series as therapy, right? Therapy, which is book therapy. Some of the things that came up were, or some of the things that we know work, the fact that when you read a book and you make that connection to the character, or you make a connection to the narrative or the context that is, which you dedicatedly like put together, there's an increased self-awareness, right? There's also just almost like catharsis, like you kind of like, you how coming in as a 28-year-old already person with your mindset, kind of with the way you have your way of life and how you think, how you see things, and then you kind of, you come in and you're in this society that is suddenly forcing you to look at other things and think about other things. Share with our audience what writing this story, specifically writing of this story of this princess, this royal person, of the wisdom and of her grandpa as guide. Tell me what it felt like for you on a personal note to be able to put these stories down on paper for us and for generations to come, to be able to that type of
No, first of all, it felt like service, as you know how I approach a lot of things, especially when it was a download. It felt like it was imperative, it was important, it was necessary, right? It had to happen, right? Now, when it comes to what it felt like, be relaying the information, talking about, I had mixed feelings. Again, it all depended on the country I was working on at the time, because again, not all countries have the best stories. What was the country I dealt with that? I think it might have been Senegal. I'm not sure. I believe it was Senegal, where we had the colonialist that Leopold that hacked off the hands of people. He cut off their hands in the country, and so that country was not. It was hard for me to write about, right? But I found myself like zoning in. I believe it was. Don't quote me on it, but I think it was. I think it was Senegal. But I had to find something that was going to be more educative to write about for the children. So it took me on different. It took me on a should I say roller coaster? So some countries I was finding out even things that I didn't know, obviously, because Africa is quite a large continent. But there were some that were dark, while some were empowering. Like there's the argument about where the Bible, the Garden of Eden. There have been arguments about where the Garden of Eden is located in the Bible, right? And some people will say like, okay, it's towards more to the Middle East. But there's some articles that say that put it in Botswana, which is in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So finding out that was like, oh, wow. But then knowing us as Africans, it also taught me a lot. The whole journey was quite revealing. Knowing us as Africans, we didn't set out to try to claim stuff. We didn't which again ties into the oral history, not really writing our stories down, this and that. But I noticed by nature, we are really laid back people across Africa. We're quite, and there's, I've had a conversation with someone in the past that where we talked about the West being more industrialized, the West being more ahead, and Africa being really laid back. And there was a joke about the fact that, you know, with our nice tropical weather, you know, it's very easy to get your food. You can just sit under a mango tree and just pluck your food and not need to do much more than that, as opposed to here where you have to, you know, deal with the climate, you know, like the snow. And you know what I mean? So I found that, but all in all, my take on the, you know, Africa is the fact that a lot of people are really laid back. A lot of people are really just about surviving and just going about their business, which ties into why things like trying to claim stories, like, okay, you know, or trying to like, you know, the fact about Botswana being the location for where we have the Garden of Eden. I don't see us caring whether it's said it's there or it's somewhere else. Nobody cares. People are just going to focus on survival and move on. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I encountered, but those were things that I encountered that I found very interesting. Like, oh, wow, this is news to me. But it also ties into the fact that, again, when we talk about geography and how Africa ended up being split off, you know, from even India and all the tectonic plates and all of that, a lot happened geographically that present day Africa, you know, is really not Africa. You know what I mean? It was really all together at some point, you know?
Yes.
And so that kind of ties into what really is Africa when we talk about Africa from how many ADs ago, you know what I mean? Or BC ago kind of thing. But I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but it was quite interesting, the journey to creating, you know, the different countries. I learned a lot. Two, I was taken aback by so many different things I found out. But the good thing was that I found a system that worked, which was, you know, list the basics. For instance, like, okay, the culture, the tribes, the languages, the government, the this. So I listed a couple of those and then found one area in the country to focus on. And so once I had that system in place, it became easier to tackle each book in that manner, you know. But every location presented its own set of facts. And, you know, once I got to the northern part of the country, so we would call them the MENA countries. Well, middle, again, ties into the tectonic plate splitting. How far away are we from Turkey, really? What happened in the previous years? You know, how close was Morocco? Morocco is Africa, but how close was Morocco to Turkey? And, you know, because even thinking about the fact that it's split by the Gulf of, off the top of my head now, the Gulf of, we know it. Think about it's not the Gulf of Morocco. It's a very common, it starts with a G. It's Gibraltar. Gibraltar. The Rock of Gibraltar, yes, it's split by a very little tiny piece of waterway. You understand that in previous years it was probably joined together. And so what am I trying to say? When I focused on Middle Eastern or MENA countries, so Middle Eastern and North African countries, I found that there was such a huge similarity. And that's why there's the argument about some of them claim like Egypt, they claim that they're not from Africa. And they're more from the Middle Eastern part of the world, again, because of the way their hair and all of that. But we can argue that based on even just biology and, you know, the heat and you know, the atmosphere and why they ended up being the way they are, or even the fact that they blended with more to the, you know, to the European side of the world. I don't know. It's a lot of arguments, but I found that area very interesting. And it had a lot of trade conversations, and it had a lot of connections to Bible stories. The northern part, you know, Cleopatra, for instance, or the Ark of the Covenant. You know, where is it located? You know, I think at some point it went missing, but they found it in some, I think it's a monastery, I believe, where they kept it to be hidden. So those stories that tie back to what the Bible talks about, that's what I encountered in the north of Africa. And it was really, really interesting. It was fun, and then that's where we have the Sahara Desert, and it was fun.
Depends. I think it always also depends on the time in, sort of the timeline, what scholar predominates in that timeline that you're reading.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
Talk about migration and movement, right? We know that even whether we're looking at Africa or we're looking at other parts of the world, like the occupants are not always necessarily original occupants, right?
That's true.
So there could be, for whether the people who currently occupy some parts of the world as we speak are always right? So because there's been a lot of migration, there's been a lot of power dynamics,
yes.
The guns or the weapons to kick somebody else out, so there's all that have happened
over the years.
But I think the most powerful aspect is the telling of that story by a young female who is guided by her very wise veteran
grandfather.
Wait, too, that grandpa, they don't necessarily have a voice or did not get acknowledged for their role, right? In the world, kind of you are this Black person who served in the war, but nobody acknowledges you, nobody gives you a medal, nobody says you're good, right? Quite your country, maybe some parts of you of the community celebrated you, but really nobody. So I also love that this grandpa, who is a World War One, right? World War
Two.
World War II veteran gets to eventually, share his views and his opinions.
Yes. And it wasn't. Yeah, it was important I included him there again because of my own journey with finding his information. So I haven't been to Nigeria since 2012. It's been 11 years. And one of these days I'm going to go so I can rummage through my dad's stuff and even some of his stuff that have been preserved, and so I can get actual information about, because I had to, so my journey was having to reach out to the British war museum, the people in charge of the war information, and they wrote me back. They were kind enough. They even mailed stuff back to me and said that I have to go back to my country to find, because they found some information about his battalion, but then it was handed over to Nigeria. So most African veterans were treated that way, where their information was handed over to their country. And again, think of when the war happened, when it ended, 1945, I believe, and the fact that Nigeria was still in colonial rule during that time, and the fact that we gained independence. I believe it wasn't really priority to preserve the information. It wasn't even considered. Because when you think of the fact that a lot of the veterans were forcefully taken into the war, were forcefully, signed up for the war. It wasn't like they willy-nilly just decided to, you know what I mean? So who knows? Yeah. So it might have been a traumatic experience that they wanted to erase out of even their own history. They probably, again, maybe the government at the time, it wasn't the most interesting thing going on. Gaining independence, and then look at it, 7 years after independence, there was the war. So already we had our own internal strife. Absolutely. That whatever information could have been handed to, was it Azikiwe or the people around him, who knows what they did with it. It wasn't important at the time. And so he's someone, just like you said, who's dealing with his own traumatic experience of suppression, right? Yes. And lack of acknowledgement. So, and then survival factors in. The fact that everybody at the time, Nigeria was that when we had, like, after the war, there was the exchange rate of $1 to a naira. Was it a pound to a naira? And then it was devalued a couple years down the line. And so people were more focused on survival, that keeping their war history or their experience, or even how do I say, unpacking the trauma of being war veterans was not even considered. It was unimportant. You just had to get up and keep going, really. You know, so
and because you also think about so first of all, like you said, they were not celebrated by the people who they fought on behalf. And when they came back to their communities, I'm not even sure the communities appreciated what they had done. Right?
No.
And the subsequent wars we had in Nigeria, I mean, depending on what side you were on, who lost and who won, right? It's not even something to discuss or something to, talk about or
talk about. Yeah.
Stopped everything on that table. Nobody has, like I said, nobody has unpacked what really happened.
What really happened, exactly. So, like my mom experienced the war, the 1967 to 1970 war. I think it was 3 years. My dad didn't because he was in Lagos, right? So the western part of Nigeria didn't really, I don't know if your parents were here at the time, so they didn't even experience it, period.
They were in the east, so they did.
They did experience it. Yeah. So my mom did. So I was trying to say, what tied to what you said about it not being mentioned. No, my mom would mention it, but she would mention it from a traumatic, so like like, oh, there was no salt. All of a sudden the salt went missing for years. They didn't have salt. Or she would talk about the jets, the fighter jets going across her head, over her head. And she would say that they would always dock. And I think she carried the trauma.
Yes.
She must have carried the trauma, but that's the only person who I know ever spoke about the war was my mother. Always talking about, when there's like a shortage, she's thinking of, to go buy bags of salt. What? Why are you going to go buy bags of salt? Just because salt went missing during the war.
But that is her perspective, right? Like, I mean, something as commonplace as salt was not available. I've heard when this has been through all the years where, when difficult times arrive in Nigeria, or difficult times have arisen in Nigeria, some of these who went through the war would say, you people are here just opening your mouth like, yeah. You don't want war. Like, I've heard people like, I don't want to mention who now, but they'll be like,
yes.
Right? Because they
experience it firsthand.
What it was to wake up every day and not know if that would be your last day. Because you didn't know that bomb was going to be thrown. You didn't know if it was going to be you. You didn't know after you took off, you didn't know who you would meet when you went back.
That's true.
I've heard about some of my extended family members that were lost. Like, there's one that they talk about the most pathetic one that was lost on the last day of the war, something like that. So there's those stories that people have, right, that they don't talk about. So there's a lot of trauma. There's been a lot of trauma that with the Princess Naku series, with the way that this bold, energetic,
dark-skinned 15-year-old girl. That's
like,
another thing. I did that on purpose. The fact that I made her darker skinned than the average girl or whatever. It was intentional as well.
Yeah, the fact that she gets to explore different parts of Africa and show us other aspects, right? Remind us that there are other aspects of Africa. There are things that we celebrate. It gives us permission, if you ask me, give us permission to not just reflect on our personal stories, but also reflect on the collective.
Yes.
And celebrate those that were never celebrated, right?
Correct.
People who have fought hard, whether it's people who were in specific wars within Nigeria, even some of those wars that we've talked about in more in bigger spaces where some of the colonial masters stood to gain. We've heard those conversations, right, about some of those wars that were initiated somewhat or by colonial masters, even when they had, right? So whether it was pain that was individual or personal, pain that was collective, this is also to think about other aspects of our history, to celebrate history and celebrate the people who nobody has celebrated. Those
unsung heroes. Yes.
Think about them and celebrate all the that went to wars, in places where they were not even recognized, like your grandpa in a World War.
In the World War, yeah, never acknowledged.
Celebrate that.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. The most from the story I heard, the most my grandpa would do is like wear his war uniform and parade like Uguta, walk on the streets when he eventually came back. And then, depending on who views him, some would laugh, some would crack up, some would point, because to them it's like, okay, what's he? There he goes again, the soldier man. There he goes. To them it's like, okay, what is this war? Because then they don't, because I remember when I was young, they told me about World War. I knew my grandfather fought in World War II, but we never studied about World War II in Nigeria. And so that was information I had that I couldn't really share with anybody, because of what importance was it to anybody, even in social studies, or you know what I mean? It was not important. I would encounter it in my literature books, because again, literature is all about storytelling and writing, and most of the books we used were more books that were Western, a couple of African books, right? But I would encounter it, but that was where it ended. And so it became important for me to actually give him his honor, right? Give him his flowers. How many years, he died in 94. So we're going on 30 years, I believe. Is it 30? It is 30, correct? Yes, by next year it will be 30, yes. So 30 years after his passing is when I'm, and it's funny, we're going far to talk about even the village boys and girls, even my own direct family. I bet, my brother said to me, Uche, you and this grandpa story. He said it to me, he says, Uche, yeah, that's almost like, okay, so what's the big deal? Okay. And I'm like, Nassau doesn't even mention it. Adobe at least indulges me once in a while, so I'm even going far talking about the villagers. How about even my own direct family? I'm wondering, like, what's wrong with this Uche, hampering on grandpas. So but again, it ties into that, give them their flowers, acknowledge them, acknowledge people who did work. And I still think I'm going to write Prince Charles. I said that when his mother was alive, and I ended up just writing the War Museum, the people, the national, not just that, I have a list of people I wrote, but I never got a response back except for that, the war college. It wasn't a war college, I forget what it was. Even Amarachi's daughter helped me do a bit of the research as well. She was serving as a royal cadet in her school, and so she was excited to assist. And then we only got that response back. But again, the response, there's no way to go back to it because it says, go back to your country and find out what they did with that information. So that's where it ends. Until I get to Nigeria, then I'll pick it back up, so.
Okay, so I think this is a good time to wrap up. Okay. For our Africa Day edition, where we've kind of looked at the power that Princess Naku series has as a healing tool. Help people with self-awareness, help people with catharsis, help people with just giving themselves permission to celebrate the positivity of Africa. Also to delve into both the individual pain and collective pain of
pain. Correct. Of us. Yes.
I found that old poem that we cited back in the day, and I thought, in celebration of who we are with Uche, where we're coming from, and that you and I are interested in this. Like you said, not everybody is necessarily interested in like revisiting the past and thinking about the collective and all that, but I think it's important for us to honor those that have come before us, and to
that's awesome.
Also think about the Africa that is the future, because I had never really paid attention to that poem until I found it again today. I read it back then.
Oh, nice.
I didn't pay attention, but
from back in the day, yeah.
It's also speaking or calling on an Africa, a new Africa, where we can really be free, right? Because we mentally free from the chains of slavery and colonialism and apartheid, right?
Yes,
to be
indeed.
totally free. So I want to pull up that poem.
The poem, yes, I have it here.
as our way to conclude. And
I like this better than my well, not in that regard. I mean, like in the with our focus being, this. I prefer to read this than I have my own Africa poem, which maybe on another day we're going to read. But to honor our Africa Day tomorrow, yes, I like this one. And this was written by what's his name?
David Diop.
David Diop, I believe. Yes. He was, what country was he from? It was from a French-speaking country.
I'm not sure.
Yes. It's always nice to get the background of the writers, because that kind of tells you what state of mind they were in when they produced this. What was their own personal experience before they birthed it? You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but yes, we must have learned about him back in the day, but I can't pull it up now. But I found it. It's here. So tell me when you're ready.
So I'm ready. Okay.
You want to do it together, or should I do the first half and then you do the second, or we do it together? Together?
Let's do together.
Together. Okay.
But tomorrow is about integration. Let's integrate.
Correct. Let's integrate, right? Good one. So.
Okay, go.
Africa. My Africa. Africa
of
proud warriors in ancestral savannas. Africa, of whom my grandmother sings, on the banks of the distant river. I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins. Your beautiful black blood that irrigates
the fields.
I know, that's deep. That's deep. You know what that means?
Yes.
You know, it's bloodshed.
That was shed. The blood that was shed on those fields. Yes. Yes.
The blood of your sweat. The sweat of your work. The work of your slavery. Africa. Tell me, Africa. Is this your back
that is
unbent? This back that never breaks under the weight of humiliation. This back trembling with red scars and saying no.
Yes.
No or yes?
Yes, mine says yes.
Mine says no.
Okay,
but let's keep going, because I think this person is trying to make it like easier to digest. It says, and saying no to the whip under the midday sun. But a grave voice answers me. Impetuous child. That tree. Young and strong.
That
tree over there. Splendidly alone. Amidst white and faded flowers. That is your Africa.
Your Africa. Springing up anew. Springing up
patiently. Obstinately.
Whose
fruit bit by bit acquires the bitter taste of liberty. David Diop, well done.
Our Africa. That
is our Africa.
That is our Africa.
But you know what I love? And in my own poem about Africa, I stated it in there that there's what I love about Africa. I'm just trying to tie both together, is the fact that there is no anger. If anything, there's understanding. So it's interesting that we went through, again, slavery and colonialism, but the average African is not interested in trying to get back, trying to fight, trying to take anybody out, trying to harm. There's the internal strife, There always is going to be, where there's corruption, where there's lack, but there's no desire to harm others. And that's the beauty. That's what I love. And that's the heart of a mother. That's the heart of a mother. That's the heart of a mother. Think of a mother. No matter how lousy we get, how rude kids get, how a mother is always just gonna just forgive you.
Can find somewhere in her heart to keep moving and loving and nurturing.
Yep. That is what Africa signifies. And we have that in us, even our African American brethren. We all have bits of that in us, like the patience, the desire to just be at peace. I think it's to be recognized. People just want to survive. They just want to survive.
You know, when you say it that way, because I don't know that maybe I've articulated that here, but I've never felt it here, like the way you say it with the peace. I would even argue that it's not a survival thing. It is a thriving thing. Because when you survive, you're thinking of just the right now.
The right now, yes. There's a lack associated with survival. Yes.
But survival is very like, like it's you or me. Like either I go or you stay, But I think the thriving thing kind of like it.
Yeah, I think thrive is a better word.
Like, there's getting that Africa is about thriving, right? Because we want peace. We want higher values, right? We want higher values. We're not trying to take back. We're not trying to say it's you or me. We know we're enough, right?
We know we're enough.
That contentment exists. We know we're enough, that we don't even care about, like, you can come and do all the nonsense that you have to do, but we're still standing. And like it's like we are, powerful beyond measure. It's almost like our
cup running over. Yeah.
That's why we're calm and we're peaceful. We're calm.
Because even though you come and take this and that, the earth is still going to give us more.
That is powerful.
Which is always going to just replenish itself and come right back. So back to ties to the cup running over.
That is real talk.
And so there's no reason to be angry and like fight and kill and do all that. Or steal.
Which comes from a mentality of scarcity.
Which comes from a mentality
of scarcity.
Yeah.
Wow. We're
content. We are content.
Is powerful. That is powerful.
Yeah.
Let that sip in.
Yeah. We can end on that note.
Yes.
But yes. Wow. It's really great to have this conversation. And then, in lieu of Africa Day is beautiful. Not in lieu, but in
wow. Yeah. Always a pleasure.
Yes, it's really wonderful talking with you. Yes, great. The next time we're going to talk about the importance of we'll decide that, but the fact that she's dark skinned, that's another thing to unpack, because we still have that in Africa. I was going to refer to that when I was talking about the rebuilding process and how all of a sudden bleaching became a big thing. Yes. It became imperative that women bleach their skin.
That's the one I'm talking about. It is the less than. That's what the colonialism.
It is the less than. Yes, that was what it was deposited in.
Yes, the colonialism standard of beauty, right?
Yes.
So what next time is reclaim. So our identity and colorism.
Colorism, yes. And unfortunately, it still festers in Africa and beyond, and even here.
Absolutely.
Where it is held up, it's upheld. It's the predominant choice. Yes. And then the women went through, again, imagine people who went through maybe the war and this and that, and then needing to focus on the physical, because now the colonialists or colonial masters and their wives had left, but then they needed to step it up, because now those women with their beautiful long hair and their light skin, our men now wanted that. Their eyes had been opened. What's the thing about?
That's why I love the new show, Queen Charlotte, with the women and they're celebrating their beautiful black.
Yes. Kinky hair. Yes. Like even when you talk about it, look at me. I have my hair. It's part of the colonialism too.
Yeah.
I like the hair, but I'm still, you know what I mean? So
yes.
it has stayed. Mm-hmm.
So we can maybe we can send out a poll early enough. Maybe this might be if other people could join us. I think it might make more sense if we
that's good.
Who are willing to show up and be authentic and honest.
Yes. And we can even
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we could tie it into, I don't know if we want to do it once a month or twice a month, because the next time could be during Juneteenth and World Refugee Day. They're just a day apart. 19th and 20th of June. Or if you want us to have one before then as well.
The 19th, which is Juneteenth, 19th is a Monday, 20th is a Tuesday. So maybe we could plan for that weekend, like leading up to both.
Okay.
That would be in about a little over 3.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good. The reason I say that is because of the theme. Again, the theme of immigration, and also it ties into what we're talking about. So identity and colorism and just beauty standards. And beauty standards, yes.
Okay.
All right. It's great talking with you.
Okay, good night.
All right, have a good night. Take care. Bye.